Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. You may have seen our little mini series where I did Threadripper Pro versus Intel 12th Gen, and I kind of came to the conclusion that my new editing PC was going to be with Threadripper Pro. So over the last few weeks, I've been doing some testing on the side to see which option would be the best for me, like after that video, mind you, and I came up with Threadripper Pro. So what we're gonna do today is build out my new Threadripper Pro editing PC with the parts that you can see on that table right behind me. So without further ado, let's jump in and build an absolute beast. As mentioned, a lot of testing has gone into coming up with these parts, and some of them are being reused out of my current editing PC, if that makes sense. So I've swapped out some parts in that PC to make this one the beast. So I've got the storage card that comes with the WRX80 Sage, and it's got a bunch of M.2 drives. So I have one for the operating system and some working drives in there. And the reason why I use a storage card like this is mainly because if something happens, I can pull the card out and ultimately put it on another motherboard and not have too many issues. And it's easy for me to pull the card out and access drives rather than getting in and pulling stuff off the motherboard. This is the RTX 3090 Founders Edition that came out of my current editing PC, and it's been an absolute workhorse. Yeah, it's pretty dusty, but this thing gets absolutely pummeled every single day. And I've got an AverMedia Live Gamer 4K capture card. This is when I do videos where I do screen recording of other PCs, so you may have noticed us doing that kind of stuff in the past. And it's easier for me to just plug the PC into my editing PC and use the voiceover setup on my editing PC to do all of that. I haven't really shared any of the specs so far of what I've actually gone with this anywhere. It will have the 5975WX in it eventually with the 32 cores. For now, we've got the 3975WX. The RAM is a little bit of an interesting one actually. So the story goes is I was looking to get RAM for this, and I was chatting to one of my really good friends in a private message thing on Discord, and he's like, dude, I've got 256 gigs of RAM that I pulled out of a server being a bit weird. Do you want to test it on the setup and see if it will work for your new editing PC? Essentially, the main issue with this memory was that because it's a server pool, it had quite a bit of ECC errors. So I ran memtest on this system for about 2 days straight. I found that it had a lot of recoverable ECC errors, which memtest ended up fixing. 256 gigs of registered ECC works absolutely perfectly. The only downside with this memory was the fact that it's only 2133. What I ended up doing is, because it doesn't support DOCP or XMP or whatnot, I manually overclocked this memory. I loosened the timings up to CL16. I overclocked it to 3200 and it works fine. So we've got much faster memory than this thing is rated for. It is absolutely solid. And I feel like I got a little bit lucky. I had a little bit of a conundrum over the weekend. It's kind of why this video is about 4 or 5 days later than I wanted it to be. I kept having this debate with myself whether or not I was going to water cool the CPU. I think I might do it in the future, but from all the thermal testing that I've done with this cooler, and actually because the RAM is so low, there is nothing that impedes the airflow on this, and this Noctua cooler works fine. So I'm just gonna air cool it for now, and if I do end up water cooling this, there'll be another video in it, but for now, for the sake of, you know, a rock solid workstation, even though my current editing PC is water cooled, this is gonna work a treat. The other thing is, I didn't use any thermal paste on this. Okay, don't freak out. I used a Carbonaut pad that covers the whole IHS, and I've had no issues with it. In fact, I haven't removed this cooler from the motherboard since I did the original Threadripper Pro testing. The case was another one of those kind of decisions that took such a long time to come up with a good solution. I know someone's gonna comment, that motherboard doesn't even technically fit in this case. Not true. I've got a couple little non-janky ways to make this motherboard work. The LandCool 3 technically only supports motherboards up to around 28 centimeters wide. But what I actually did to get this to fit was, there's a mid plate that comes in here with all the cable pass-throughs for the case. I removed the plate, so then we've got this whole area here to mount the motherboard. Now, the only sacrifice we're making is we're not able to use all of the mounting points on the motherboard to hold the motherboard into place, and you might be thinking to yourself, why did you even use this case? Well, it's not as big as some of the other cases that support this board, and I just hate huge cases. I want something that's going to be easy to move around, and there's no way to pass any of the cables through here. So what I came up with is these cutouts are so huge on the bottom of the case, I can run the 24-pin power cable and all the cables I need up through this hole here. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty, but I couldn't care less. This is not supposed to be a pretty PC. This is supposed to be super duper functional. The good thing about this is the motherboard is still held up by that center peg. I had to remove a bunch of the standoffs because the standoff pattern is slightly different. Something else I wanted to mention as well, and I thought you guys might find this pretty interesting. Wendell from Level 1 Techs did a review of a Puget built system. It's a Threadripper Pro 5000 system, obviously, and they used the same CPU cooler. However, one thing they did differently with their build, and they had thermal imaging to show the airflow for this as well, which is really, really freaking cool. But they actually had the intake of the fan for the CPU cooler on this side. They had an intake set directly in line with the CPU cooler, and then everything would obviously exhaust out the back as well. I'm mentioning this because I'm not going to be doing that in this system, because I'm going to be mounting more than one fan at the top. So we'll actually have a lot of intake from the front of this case. That was in the Fractal Define 7XL, not an excellent airflow case, whereas this thing is completely designed for it. So we've got these three massive 140s that come in this case that we're using for intake. I'm sure some people have seen that review because they use the same CPU cooler and the same motherboard for their system. I just want to get this system running because I got plenty of work to do. Another thing I love about this case for builds like this in particular is these flaps for getting access to the basement. I don't care if you can see stuff down there, but the fact that I can just pull it down and access stuff is really easy. I'm gonna be loading in this massive 1300 watt power supply into the basement. It's a Cooler Master 1300. It's one of Cooler Master's bigger power supplies, I would say. As mentioned, because this is quite a unique use of this case, and these cutouts are so huge, this is exactly what I was talking about. Pass the 24-pin power cable up here, and we can plug it in on the front side. I'll cable manage most of it, so it'll be one clean cable run basically, but see, it's actually not too bad, right? And people will be like, oh, aesthetics and all this other stuff. Aesthetic. This thing is a workhorse. It's meant to do a job, and that is make the videos on this channel. For the case fans, I've decided to go with Phanteks T30 fans. These are regular 120mm fans. The only difference with these compared to regular fans are, instead of being 25mm fans, these are 30mm fans, which means the fan pitch is slightly different. Whether or not this increases airflow is still up for debate. The brilliant thing with this whole setup is actually there's almost no cable management on the back side of this. Not like this would be a problem with the LAN Cool 3 anyway, but you can see that there's basically just two fan cables to manage. Everything ended up being pretty clean on the inside with Velcro tie downs tying it to that side of the motherboard tray. I don't think it looks terrible, and I don't care because it's just got to work. Now we get to put in all the fun stuff. So I've already configured the top slot of the motherboard for the storage card. Straight below it with no gap, we're going to put the capture card in. All of these slots are by 16 slots, so it doesn't matter what slot we put any of this stuff in. And I haven't seen a PC with stacked slots like this in a while. So we'll put that card right there. So we've got our capture and our storage all sorted. Maybe you're wanting to know why I'm putting them so close. Well, the idea eventually is to get one of the Intel GPUs, so probably an A380 or something like that, so I can have quick sync with Threadripper for timeline performance. So once I get my hands on one of those cards, we will be retesting and rebenching the whole system with QuickSync on Threadripper, because that, my friends, will be the ultimate performance. This is an 8-slot case. I was kind of wishing it was a 9-slot case so I could use the bottom PCIe slot, but I'm gonna use the second one from the bottom. Realistically, if I used a 2-slot card, I could put it right in the bottom slot, but I put the 3080 Ti Founders in my current editing PC, so I could put the 3090 Founders in here. This is a full fat 3-slot card. And there's plenty of airflow for this card as well because this is all completely open on the bottom. We will put, oh, hello. I also wanted to mention that all the connectors on the bottom of this motherboard are right angled, so they're pointing straight down so the GPU doesn't hit it. It's designed for it, actually. And that, my friends, is my new editing PC. But does this system work? Let's find out. Time for the moment of truth, but as I've said, I've been using this system on and off for the last almost month now, so it's gonna work. There we go, we post. So yeah, the memory training does take an incredibly long amount of time to do its thing. And what it's doing now while it sits on this is bringing up the management interface stuff as well, and then it boots up. This is the system in its fully running editing config. So this has got everything installed that I use to make videos because I've already edited a bunch of stuff with this system on the test bench. But it's working, which is a nice change for once, right? Yeah, that's a nice change. We'll set up the fan curves here. I've already set up the CPU fan curve. I think it's fine. It's very quiet. Set this one to 80 as well. Push out that fan curve a little bit more. And you can see the fan curves that we've got set now. So the CPU fan curve is quite linear. It keeps it pretty quiet. And just pull it away from that 100% duty cycle because it's just too loud. I don't want it to be that loud. And these fans actually aren't that loud, but I do have situations where I need the system to be very, very quiet. That's the new editing PC. Now, this was almost not video worthy. The only reason why I decided to make a video about this is because people were asking me what I was going to do, whether or not I was going to go Intel or Threadripper Pro. And I kind of waited a little while to do this video because I had a feeling that Threadripper Pro 5000 was coming and that it would be available to DIY. I actually mentioned that in the other videos that we did, which I'll link in the description, but because I haven't been able to get my hands on one yet, I decided, you know what, this system is so badass and it runs so well already that I might as well just share with you what I've already got, and I can upgrade the CPU at a later date, and it gives me an opportunity to show you guys what I would do if I decided to water cool this. But given how the system runs currently, I think it's going to be unlikely that I will water cool this system. Maybe I'll switch the CPU cooler, but the temps in this system are quite good. Now, it's not the coolest system, but it's the perfect balance of being quiet and cool, and that's something I can completely get behind. I hate loud computers. If you're interested in the performance of this system as it is, I've actually run all of the Puget Bench benchmarks on this. So I'll link all of that in the description down below so you can see how this thing works, and it is an absolute freaking beast. It is complete beast mode. I love it. I'm so keen to actually start using this thing properly, but now it's in a bit of a transition phase because I need to move a bunch of stuff to the network from my other PC so we can get this in its new home and editing videos on this channel. With saying that, I have two pretty similar spec editing PCs at all times, just in case something goes wrong. And you may have noticed that we've been uploading less. It's because it's the calm before the storm as well. That's all I can say for now. If you guys like this video, you know what to do. Hit the like button, make sure you get yourself subscribed, and do all those things that every other YouTuber tells you to do. If you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. It's available by clicking that join button down below. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peek, we seek, and I hope you guys like these loggy videos. Sometimes I just like making them to give you guys an update on what's going on with some of the stuff that we've talked about over the last couple months. However, we're shifting gears tomorrow. I'm starting to build a brand new PC build. Obviously, it's a build video, but it's a custom loop. We haven't done many this year, which is kind of weird because we usually do maybe 10 to 15 a year. I can't even think of one that we've done other than my own personal gaming PC this whole year. So that's changing. I'm going to be building more custom loops starting from the next video.